All right, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Baseline Bums podcast. Once again, it is your boy Rob, aka B-Ball Archives, and I am joined by my buddy Adam, aka B-Ball Hot Takes.
It is good to be back. Thank you for the plug. I feel like we haven't gotten together in a few weeks, and I appreciate you doing that ballin' ass episode during the Christmas days. That was legit. Enjoyed some of the topics that you got to discuss, but I'm happy to be back and looking forward to discussing some ball with you today.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, definitely appreciate you back in the studio. Of
course.
And we do have some great topics today. We're going to be talking about all-star voting. We're going to be bringing up the recent fan returns for the all-star selections. A lot of interesting names.
Some
on
of
that
you
list.
are wild and out there voting. That's ridiculous. But
Warriors fans, we're looking at you.
Lakers fans,
We're looking at you as well. Absolutely.
West Coast in general, just crazy.
Right, some delusion in California. That's to be expected. But then we're going to be moving on to some MVP chat. Some voter fatigue. Is it there?
I'm not tired anymore.
Right.
I'm ready to go back to the well, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. And then we're going to be segueing on to some trade deadline deals. What teams are looking to blow it up and looking to make a move? We're going to be chatting about that, and
Yeah.
a lot of great stuff coming right there. But let's just
You want to just get into it?
yeah, let's just dive on in.
Why don't we start by talking about some of those crazy all-star voting selections? Interested to see, I think they came out with a graphic that you probably you've seen about guards and forwards and different conferences and some wilding that we've spoken about. Some of these voters have been. What are some of the names that you've seen that kind of stand out to you think that are kind of bullshit and crazy?
Well, I mean, I think we'll just go right down the list. We can just start off with the Western Conference front court. Obviously, a lot of these names make a lot of sense, but
Yeah.
Andrew Wiggins, I think this is the second year in a row he has been massively overvoted by Golden State fans.
It's so tough for me to wrap my head around Andrew Wiggins actually being a really good basketball player because of all of his inefficient ball chucking seasons in Minnesota. But is he an actual, you saw him in the playoffs. He was a really good defensive player, a lot better than we thought. I still have a hard time looking at that name and comparing him to some of the other NBA All-Stars right now. Right? He's averaging 18 a game. Defensive numbers are a little bit better, but that's not one of the best 25 players in the NBA, right? Not close.
No, absolutely not. Yeah, absolutely not. He's not a game changing kind of guy. He's like a third or fourth option on your team that's going to help elevate you. I mean, I don't think he even has the ability to be a floor raiser. I think he tried to do that and it failed. I think he is showing now that he can help a good team be great, but he doesn't have the skill set to do what a lot of these other all-stars have proven that they can do.
Yeah, and being an NBA All-Star, being a top 20, 25 player in the NBA is not an easy feat. So it's not like hating on him. He's a good quality NBA player that should never sniff an All-Star game. Now I think he's putting up 18 points a game this year. His defensive stats are actually pretty good. He's shooting over 50%, but I think he just missed 10 straight games. I don't know how you can miss 10 straight NBA games. His first game back, he scored 12 points in 18 minutes.
Yeah.
But that just goes to show you states like California, Lakers voters, Warriors voters, there's just such a big population of their fan base, and they're the ones voting the most. It's just kind of ridiculous for him to be discussed.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, it has to be about the guys you want to see in there. Who really wants to see Kevon Looney in an All-Star game? Who's saying yeah, let's go see Kevon Looney set a really hard screen? Who wants that?
Nobody wants Kevon Looney outside of Warriors fans. Who else even knows that he exists other than people that really follow the NBA? Kevon is never going to be a household name. Right.
Yeah, there's so many other bigs in the West that I would rather be in there over him.
Of course. The half of the starting centers in the conference
Right,
are starters.
Sabonis, Ayton,
Yeah.
Valanciunas. I mean, I'd even take Zubac over him. Like,
Zubac's having a great season. What
yeah,
what was that line he put up a couple of weeks ago? He had like
31 and 29.
That's insane.
Absolutely nuts. Like, I would have him in there over Kevon Looney, and it's crazy. And you could probably name a couple more guys too, like Alperen Şengün. Give me Alperen Şengün over Kevon Looney.
No Houston Rockets should be sniffing an All-Star game anytime soon.
I agree with that, but I like that young man's game.
Yeah, no, his post moves are good. You made a post on TikTok not long ago about him having the best post moves in basketball, and I mean, I saw it in the NBA draft. He's actually who I wanted us to pick. I think it was he in the same draft as Primo?
Yeah.
Eesh. Yeah, I was all over Sengun, but I don't know that his game would have translated to playing alongside Pirtle, and he probably would have like helped us win games.
Right.
And that's not something that we're like winning too many games as is right now.
Right. We're not looking to win games, but yeah, ultimately there's a lot of bigs that we would rather have in the West over a guy like Kevon Looney. But when we're looking at the Western Conference bigs, like who are some of these other guys on this list that are kind of sticking out to you? I mean, I know like Draymond's on there with the 8th most votes.
Yeah, I need to pull up the graphic. There's no way with the season the Warriors are having that anyone outside of Steph really should be garnering All-Star votes right now.
Yeah.
And Steph's been injured half of the regular season so far. I think it goes back to like they need to modify the way that All-Star votes are getting done. And I feel like you see some of these names and you look in years past and they rarely actually make it. Some of these like
Right.
bullshit names we're talking about, like I like some guards from the West. I think there are more outrageous guards that made it on that list. Austin Reeves,
Oh my gosh.
which like he's a good basketball player. Like he was good at Oklahoma. I enjoyed watching him whenever he battled with Baylor. But like, how does he get one vote? Austin Reeves is Russell Westbrook. I'm sorry, like done better since he's gone to the bench, but still statistically having one of the most inefficient seasons
Yeah.
in the NBA. Like him and Pat Bev, like two of the worst shooting guards in basketball, and they're sharing a backcourt oftentimes.
Right.
I don't know how Westbrook's on the list. I don't know how Poole's like not having that great of a season, right?
Dude, people are blinded by his scoring output and they're ignoring the inefficiency, and it's boggling my mind. I said that give me Ant over him, give me De'Aaron Fox over him. I would even take the few games that Desmond Bane has played, I would take that over Jordan Poole because of the efficiency.
Oh my goodness.
And people were jumping down my throat, and it's like, dude, you're not watching the games.
I mean, Poole's been thrusted into like having to do more with Steph out, but he's not an all-star caliber player. If anything, his stock has gone down since he just signed that contract. I don't think he could go to another team and automatically make them a really good basketball team. He's one of those guys that is a complimentary piece, that it's nice to have a guy like that can just go get a bucket when you want him to. He can create his own offense, but he's had a really disappointing season, and I haven't been impressed with, like you said, his efficiency since Steph's been out. He's a ball chucker. Somewhat.
Yeah.
I mean, he can be good at it sometimes, but it's not the kind of basketball that I think is going to raise the ceiling of your team.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. For the large part of the season, he wasn't even shooting 40% from the field. And it's like, dude, I don't care if you're putting up a 30-piece if your team is suffering.
Right.
It's like, yeah, I'm not cool with that. But yeah, there's definitely some head scratchers in the West. I'm glad to see SGA getting so many votes because obviously he deserves it. Obviously going to be a first-time All-Star. That I love to see that. Clay was another one that really was a head scratcher to me. It's like
his best days are behind him.
Right. He's no longer the defensive player he once was. Without that impact, I don't care if he's averaging 18 to 20 points a game. His impact just isn't there anymore. So I'm looking at him as just a non-all-star kind of player from here on out, and it's to see him getting votes over Lillard or Booker. It's come on, guys. What are we doing here?
I think that you just look at the population of California and how many Warriors fans. It just, the All-Star voting's become nothing but a popularity contest. I think that the NBA, like how much buzz does that actually give fans? Like feeling like they have a vote. Does that really give you that much of a rush to where the NBA feels like they have to sacrifice the integrity of the All-Star game just to like hey, you're involved in like getting to choose some of these bums. Now, like
Yeah.
Clay's obviously not a bum, right? He's the kind of guy that can make any basketball team better. He doesn't need the ball. He doesn't hold the ball, right? Like I think he can play within the flow of any offense, but he's not an all-star anymore. He's not. He went through too many injuries. He can't put in the same level of effort on the defensive end. Like Clay used to be the guy that you'd put on the best player, and he'd be able to not lock people down, but he was a very, very good defender.
Yeah.
And that's gone, and he's not as good of a shooter anymore either, unfortunately.
Yeah, he was the epitome of a 3-and-D guy. He was the guy that on any given night he could set a new NBA record for most threes in a game while D'ing up the best perimeter guy on the other team.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's understandable when he was making all-star, when he was an all-star selection and back when he was when he was an all defensive kind of player, but that was pre-injury. So
And more so like back when the Warriors were actually a dominant NBA team. I mean, they're middling around 500 right now. I think they're like a game below. They're in between the 8 seed and the play in right now. Back whenever you had like, look at the Pistons, whenever the Pistons were in their prime in like the mid 2000s and they had like 4 All-Stars. None of those guys were like first team All NBA talents outside of maybe Ben Wallace because of his defensive rating.
Right.
But those were like complimentary role players, almost all of them. And they made 3 or 4 of them. I think Tayshaun Prince made an all-star game. Like they made it because they were a dominant NBA team. And that's like the same reason Draymond Green made it a few years back or further back than that, because you had a dominant NBA team and you had really good players that were all contributing to the greater good. Now it's like, oh, I'm a Warriors fan. I'm just going to vote for this guy because I'm a fan of his.
Yeah.
And it's just not, it's disrespectful to the guys like Domantas Sabonis who are having, I don't even want to say a career year because that dude balls out. He balled out last year, but like he's elevated the Sacramento Kings from a laughing stock to a middling West playoff team. And that guy needs to be getting votes, like 100% of the votes versus a Kevon Looney or a Andrew Wiggins there's some guys in the East that are pretty laughable as well.
Yeah. Or even a guy that we've seen in the All-Star game multiple times, like Kawhi. Like Kawhi just hasn't played enough this season, and when he has played, it hasn't looked amazing.
Right.
So it's like Kawhi's just getting in there because of his name.
Kawhi and even Paul George. Paul George misses every other game. I own him on
Right.
my fantasy team, and it's been incredibly frustrating.
Right.
I actually just lost KD the same night. I have KD and Hero on my team. And Hero hurts his knee. I think he's actually okay. I'm like the last play of the game. And KD, sprained his MCL. I think it's not as bad as originally thought, but
It's still looking like 3 to 4 weeks. You could be a month without KD.
my team, yeah, we've been in first. Me and Matt Mozigimba, shout out Mosey. We co-own 2 teams together. One of them's in last all year. One of them's in first.
Nice.
You can't trust the Yahoo projections. They told us our team we drafted their first team. We've been in first all year, and they immediately tell us we have the worst team after the draft. So we modify our draft strategy, and like the next team we draft is dog shit. I drafted Harden, so maybe I should have done that.
Yeah. Harden.
D-Rob?
Yeah. We'll just go ahead and fix D-Rob over there.
Sorry, D-Rob.
No, you're all good. But yeah, there's a lot of crazy selections out in the West. Definitely multiple head scratchers whenever you're looking at the whole list. But let's mosey on our way over to the East.
I mean, there's obviously one name that, like, at the guard spot that stands out to me of a guy that he's just a fan favorite. He's gone through so much in his career that Derrick Rose, like, he's going to get votes regardless of how many games he plays. But it's like he's almost at this point, like, how many games has he actually played this year?
Not very many.
Right?
I don't know the number, yeah.
Like, not many. He's just getting votes. It goes back to this being a popularity contest.
And he's barely playing any minutes.
Right.
Like I think he's playing less than like 12 minutes a game.
I mean, he's like, the 3rd or 4th best guard on his team at best right now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's in there purely based on his name. Like when I see that he has 80,000 more votes than Darius Garland, I know that people aren't voting based on the basketball being played. They're just voting because they want to see Derrick Rose in the All-Star game. And I don't hate that, but it takes away from a guy like, Jalen Brunson, who's having a really good year, who should probably be an All-Star in the East. Like he probably should be. Like you're telling me that Drew Holiday shouldn't be an All-Star in the East because we want to vote in We want to vote in D Rose.
That's the thing. Like, whenever you look at all-time greats, the amount of all-star games they make is like a factor in
Yeah.
and how people view them. And for fans to be given this autonomy to really impact how players go down in the history books, it's not fair. Like Drew Holiday, I'm fine if he doesn't make it. He's one of the best guards in the NBA, certainly one of the best defenders, but he hasn't been healthy.
Right.
It's been him and Middleton have been banged up all year. The Bucks have suffered because of it. It's opened up opportunities for other Eastern Conference teams to flourish, but he is a name that, like, yeah, you can't be giving votes to Derrick Rose whenever you've got guys like that.
Oh yeah, and especially like another guy, the former Spur, DeJounte. He's not having a horrible year either. He's putting up about 21, 7, and 5. It's like, how do you overlook a guy like that for Derrick Rose?
I'm fine DeJounte not touching the list. Maybe I'm salty because of kind of the shade he threw at the Spurs organization after getting traded. But he also, like, hasn't made the Hawks that much better.
No.
He's gotten, like, increasingly arrogant. I think that people used to view him as like a humble, hardworking guy, and then you saw some of the clips in the offseason at him, some of these runs, like throwing the ball off of random amateurs' heads. Him and Trae Young feeling like they have like a small man complex. Do
Right.
you remember that clip of Trae Young running into Zion and then like kind of shrugging his shoulders? Like Zion's
Yeah.
looking like, what are you doing, little boy? Like, I'm just not a fan of the Hawks. I'm
Yeah.
not. I kind of predicted them not getting much better at DeJounte. DeJounte is a great player that can help a team win more games, but he's not someone that can just be thrown into a team and automatically make that team better because he can't shoot the basketball.
Right. Not based on his skill set right now. He's still young, he can get better. But at the end of the day, like I also think part of the Hawks problem is Trae Young. Like he's had efficiency issues all season, has pretty much regressed like in terms of his production.
Yeah.
So I think they need to kind of figure it out because they're not gonna get better if Trae Young's playing the way he is.
I mean, they're not going to finish in the top half of the East, right? They're going to be a low seed. I don't envision them beating anyone in the top half. Maybe they could give a team like Philly a run just because Philly has their own problems. They're so reliant upon two guys, and one of them you just really can't count on as much anymore.
Right.
Harden, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
but
still,
Harden's on this All-Star list.
he'll always will be.
Right.
But he missed quite a bit. I think he missed 10 to 15 games earlier in the year.
Oh, I mean, honestly, missing games doesn't equal not getting fan votes. Like LaMelo Ball is 7th on this list, and he has not. I think he's played like 16 games, 17 games this season. It's definitely not an overall deciding factor, but there's just there's just guys who won't be viewed in the proper light because they don't get enough all-star appearances and things like this, they have their weight.
Do you think that the NBA needs to modify the way players can get in, or do you like the fan voting aspect?
Oh, I mean, I don't like any sort of fan voting whatsoever because fans will vote off emotion and not based on any kind of objectivity whatsoever. So I want to see the best players get in so the right players get the right accolades.
Do you think they should handle it the way they do like MVP votings where journalists and you get like chosen to be on a list, or do you think it should go to NBA players voting on their peers? Do you think it should be coaches, assistant coaches? What do you think the best method would be to like ensure that the right guys get there?
I mean, I think it would be a mixture of sort of the latter things you said, where it's peers, where it's peer based evaluation. I also think coaches, GMs, people that are seeing the players every single day, like those are the people that should get the votes.
Right.
Yeah, like I mean, a journalist is maybe in communication with the player every once in a while, but like they also have their own narrative. Like, I would rather see somebody who's just constantly watching them play. Like,
and it seems like they're relatively objective. Like you have like the player polls, the private player polls that are able. I can't even remember or think what they vote on, but like every once in a while there's like private polls. I think it's maybe like player rankings, and they seem to be pretty objective. So I think that they would keep the integrity right and like get in guys that deserve to get in. Right.
Yeah.
Some other names that in the East that I thought were a little interesting. One was Kyle Kuzma.
Yeah.
I mean, he's had a good season. He's actually a guy that I think is going to be targeted at the deadline by a lot of teams. I think he'd fit into a lot of different teams, but Kyle Kuzma's not an all-star, right?
No, he's not even the best front court player on the Wizards.
Who is?
Porzingis.
Okay, I just want to know.
Like, I mean,
Thought you were going to say JB Goodwin.
roughly
Just kidding, he's a guard.
roughly the same offensive output. Porzingis is a better rebounder. He's averaging over a block and a half and over a steal a game. Like, he brings that defensive mindset way more than Kuzma ever has. And so, like, I would rather see Porzingis on this list rather than Kuzma.
Do you think it's the fact that Kuzma played in LA and he's kind of like
He's more popular. He's like a social media dude. He's
Yeah.
like, you know, he's dressed in swag. He's more a part of NBA culture that exists around the game. So he's going to get those fan votes.
I want to know like the average name, or not average name, the average age of some of these voters. I think it's predominantly done through social media, so the average voter is going to be younger, and the younger guys like the Kyle Kuzmas, they like the LaMelo Balls. Like,
Right.
I saw a clip of a kid. I think they were playing at like halftime of an NBA game, and he pointed to the ground like LaMelo did and like chucked up a shot and hit all backboard. Like their influence is being held throughout the league, and it's
Oh yeah.
not the kind of influence that I want.
No, of course not. It's a little bit more of like, hey, look at me, you know, showboating stuff. When I am and always have been a fan of like production. So like,
Right.
if you're not doing the most to help your team produce, then I'm gonna come after you. And it's like some of these guys are focused on the wrong thing. But I totally agree. But yeah, there's definitely some interesting choices. Kyle Kuzma is one of them in the East. But also, you know, a guy like Nick Claxton had a lot of people kind of scratching their heads a little bit, even though he's leading the league in field goal percentage, and he's, I believe, second in blocks per
Second
game.
in blocks. He's second in total blocks per game behind Brooke Lopez.
Yeah.
But if you look at since Jock Vaughn took over, his block numbers have increased drastically.
Right. December, he was averaging about like almost 3.5 blocks a game.
I actually just made a trade for him. What do you think about this fantasy trade? I know this is a side note. I traded away James Harden and was able to get back both Claxton and LeBron. This was offered to me 2-for-1. I thought it was great value.
You traded away Harden and got LeBron and Claxton?
Right.
Oh, that's solid.
I mean,
That's a solid
Claxton's
trade.
been like a top 30 to 40 player because of his block totals, but he's been efficient.
Yeah,
He's had a
absolutely.
good season, and he's part of this revamped Nets team that was very hollow last year. And they're a team that I now see contending for a championship in part because of him, as a matter of fact.
Well, I'm not gonna lie. At the beginning of the season, I kind of wrote him off as a rim protector, and that was like, I was like, the Nets are not going to be great because they don't have a guy that down low that has that dog in him that's going to be able to just contest.
Right.
And he's really showing that. I still feel like he's a little bit on the skinny side and can get bullied around when you're 6'11", 215. You know, you're not the biggest guy down low, but he's proving that he can really alter shots, get a lot of blocks. And I think one thing that he's allowing a lot of the Brooklyn guys to do is play better defense. We're seeing KD play some of the best defense we've seen from him in his entire career, largely because he's got that freedom from having like an actually good rim protector down low.
I mean, there's a few good defenders on the Nets right now.
Right.
And I actually want to talk about some MVP contenders here in a little bit, how that's translating to teams like the Nets competing in the East. But guys like Royce O'Neal,
Yeah.
solid defender. Ben Simmons, kind of back from the dead a little bit. Never will be what he was, but
He's been inconsistent though. He's
still helping them win games.
He is. He
you
is.
know? And he's obviously he doesn't have to do as much, right? Like you don't need to play through him the way that the 76ers wanted to play through him because he doesn't have to have the ball as much. So he can be a guy that just defends, can play within the flow of the offense and just doesn't have to touch it as much to be effective.
Right.
But he's helping them quite a bit, I'd say.
Yeah.
Were there any other names that you saw on that list? There was one other one that I wrote down. And it's not that he's not having a good season because he's having one of the best rookie seasons in recent NBA history, I think. But Paolo's on that list. And maybe it's partially because there's just not as many small forwards and power forwards that are just having dominant seasons in the East outside of a few. But I think that's another popularity contest.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that Julius Randle should be on that list. Dude is putting up 24 and 10 a game. He has the Knicks performing a little bit better than people thought they would be.
Yeah.
He's definitely having a much better year than last year. And, you know, what's Paulo doing that Julius Randle isn't doing?
Losing games. No, I'm impressed. I'm impressed with the Knicks to a certain degree. Like I thought getting Jalen Brunson would help them quite a bit, and it has. I think they're one of those teams that whenever you're looking at the deadline, I mean, like they need to capitalize. They're going to have Randall under contract for a while. Brunson just signed that deal. They probably need to build. I don't know that I agreed with giving RJ Barrett that extension. I'm not a huge believer in RJ Barrett.
Neither am I.
He can't really shoot from the three. I guess he's a decent third option on a playoff team, but I don't think he's ever going to propel them to be like a champion or anything. But they've got some assets that they could go out and make moves. I think they're at the point where like the Knicks, they're sniffing playoff relevancy. I think they need to capitalize on it, even if they can't. Like I'm not foreseeing the Knicks making a finals like ever, unless they get some guy in the draft that just is way better than expected.
You think the Knicks will never make the finals again?
I mean, not with Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle as their best two players. I think
Right.
I think those guys, even though they're good basketball players, they're a second and third best player on a team that competes for a finals.
Right. With them, you still need that guy.
Right. And who is that?
No one they have.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that rounds out a lot of really good, interesting people in the East that should be selected, maybe are going to be selected, maybe they won't be, maybe they'll be snubbed a little bit. A couple other guys I want to mention in the East front court real quick. Miles Turner having a career season. I think
Is he? I'm not paying. I guess I'm not paying attention to the Pacers as much as I should be.
Dude, his play alongside Halliburton has translated to his highest points per game, highest rebounds per game. Like he's always been really, really good defender at the rim. So like he's not like elevating on that end too much, but his offensive numbers look.
What's he averaging a game right now?
About like 16 and a half and about like 8.5 rebounds.
Yeah, that's good for him.
Oh, absolutely. Great efficiency. Also, Bam Adebayo, not on this front court list. And to
I'm
me,
okay with that.
Well, I mean, to me, I'm not okay with it because I think he's defensively and offensively. I think that he's easily in the top 10. And the Heat, the only excuse you can have is the Heat haven't been performing that well. And I don't think the Heat's performance is solely based on Bam.
It's not, but he's a guy that I preseason had projected to possibly win Defensive Player of the Year. They're currently middling around 500. That's one of those teams that I don't know what direction they should go. And although Bam's always going to have good NBA seasons, I think that the Heat underproducing in general makes it okay. I mean, it's hard to leave him off the list, and then you have other guys like Nick Claxton. Like, who would you rather have? I mean, obviously, the Nets would do that swap all day long, throwing a couple picks to get Bam. So I'm not saying he shouldn't be snubbed from conversation, but I'm okay with some of these guys that just aren't helping their team win games. And the Heat are one of the, alongside the Raptors for me in the East, two of the teams that are underperforming the most. Raptors, in my mind, need to blow it up. And I'm surprised to say that because they have a lot of talent.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm definitely talking about the Raptors and teams that need to blow it up. Absolutely. I think we're both in agreement on there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that rounds out a lot of good all-star chat, a lot of fan vote chat, some cringe stuff on here, but some stuff that also makes sense.
Right.
I mean, I'm glad to see a lot of people making the all-star list, but at the end of the day, I think just fans have too much control.
Yeah.
They need zero control.
They need to modify the system. I don't know that they ever will because they want to build engagement. They want to build clicks on social media. And I think at the end of the day, they can just be like, I know this guy got a bunch of fan votes, but we're just not going to let him in.
Yeah.
But I think Andrew Wiggins started in the All-Star game last year.
Yeah, and he was even higher voted in last year. He was fourth. He's fifth this year. They're dropping him down a little bit. It's wild.
It's insane.
But yeah, I think we'll just go ahead and use that as a segue into our next topic. We're going to be talking about MVP chat. Who's at the top? Who's on this list?
Yeah.
Are we going to see voter fatigue go out the window?
This is tough because the way that NBA voting or MVP voting has always been done is voter fatigue has been a factor. And it's what's kept LeBron from not winning more MVPs than he should have. They gave Jordan all of what he wanted, more or less. But like LeBron should have maybe 8 MVPs if voter fatigue didn't exist. So I'd almost feel hypocritical saying like I'm good with it being gone, but Nikola Jokic is the best player in the NBA again, in
Yeah.
my mind, for the third straight season. Denver is sitting top of the West. I don't know how you couldn't have Jokic currently being the MVP frontrunner. There's really only a couple other names that are in contention. But I have to have Jokic. No matter what happens in a game, Jokic's impact is always felt. He doesn't have to score. Like he can choose whatever way he wants to kill you. If they double him, he's going to find the open guy. If you guard him 1-1, like they tried, like the Kings did with Sabonis, they
Yeah.
tried guarding him man to man and he torched him for 40. So regardless of what you throw at that guy, he's going to have his presence felt. He's one of the most fun players to play with, I would imagine. Like how nice would it be to play on Denver alongside him? The amount of open looks you get, like the amount of like Aaron Gordon, kind of I don't want to say a career bust, but just middling player in the Magic that's now enjoying one of his best seasons. I don't know how you can't have Jokic first right now. There's only a couple other names that are even close to him. I'm curious to see what you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, whenever I'm looking at the MVP list, he is the MVP right now. Like, I mean, there's no one else in my opinion, and he's far above and beyond. I think
There's one other name for me.
Luka is inching his way into that conversation because what the Mavs are fourth in the West right now.
Yeah.
I think that that is a great place for the Mavs to be, for Luka to remain in contention and to be damn near the top guy. But whenever I see a guy like Jokic, who last night puts up a triple double on 100% true shooting,
It's insane.
didn't miss a shot. Like, that's a guy who's not only doing exactly what his team needs him to do to win the game, but he's doing it with flawless efficiency. He's just doing it while leading his team in distribution, in scoring, and just from a leadership, a toughness mentality standpoint. So like, there's no holes in Jokic's game other than some of the defense, and he's improving.
And Denver's number one in the West. That's one of the biggest things
Right.
for me. Like Denver's a few years ago, whenever Jamal Murray, before he had gotten hurt, they were a team that was kind of on the rise and outside of the Warriors gave you one of the best chances to win it all. I would think you'd have to put them as the favorites to come out of the West at this point. The Suns are pretty much out of it.
Yeah.
Memphis, New Orleans, the Warriors are always dangerous. I think that they should be movers at the deadline to maybe improve.
Yeah.
But I think you'd have to have Denver as the favorites to come out of the West right now.
Their offense is so fluid. They're top three in every advanced metric when it comes to offense. Everything when it comes to assists and scoring, efficiency, absolutely.
And you look at the difference whenever he's on the court versus off the court.
Yeah.
Right? Like the one other name, and again, Luka Doncic is having a great season. He's always going to be in contention. He needs more help to have the more team success to really put him firmer in the conversation because he's not capable of doing much more, right? Like he
Right.
had that 60-point triple-double a week or two back. He's obviously one of the best 3 players in the NBA right now. Like if you were to start a franchise, he'd probably be second or third behind Jokic and Giannis. But like the guy that I would have second right now in MVP voting is actually KD. And
Really?
it's unfortunate that I think 2 nights ago he sprained his MCL. So like
Yes.
that's gonna be a setback. We'll see how many games he misses. But I think the Nets were on a 10 or 11 game winning streak. Part of that was because of the schedule they were playing. But KD's shooting 55 to 60%. Not total, but like he's shooting low 50s, mid 50s field goal percentage. From a fantasy standpoint, he's balling out. He's been efficient. He's played better defensively. But the team success is coming with it. I think a bunch of teams looked at the Nets preseason and had questions over them, right? Is Kyrie, where's he going to be at? He's always been a good basketball player. Will he play games? Will he try on a night in and night out basis? I think he's answered that. What's Ben Simmons going to look like? How are some of these role players going to come in and kind of gel with them? But you look at the Nets with how much they've been winning, the kind of season KD's been having. I think if he didn't go down, he's the number 2 guy for me right now. Tatum was looking great earlier in the season.
Yeah.
I think he's slowly kind of faded, and now he might not even make first team All NBA. I think there's a chance he gets kicked out of that.
Right. Well, that's a very close technicality. I feel like it's his position. It's been really tough to be first NBA in that
Yeah.
position.
Yeah. They've made it toward that award. Like you can have like 4 forwards and a guard. They'll leave
Yeah.
out
Yeah.
a center. So it's tough, but I think he was a name early season that was certainly getting talks whenever the Celtics were, I think they were first in the East for quite a while. They're still close. The whole,
Yeah.
like the 1 through the 5 seed in the East is all super, super close right now.
Yeah.
Giannis isn't really being talked about as much.
No. No, well, I think the Bucks have kind of hit their skids a little bit recently. They've shown that they can be beaten. Their offense doesn't look very fluid. Whenever Giannis is not in the game, they kind of look trash. And everyone was kind of hoping as soon as Chris Middleton came back, all of their problems would be solved. But he's starting off very slow.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of questions that still need to be answered in Milwaukee, but at the end of the day, this team is performing as good as Giannis will allow them to. So it's how good is he going to keep playing? Yes, he's playing at an MVP level, but without a healthy Middleton, we were talking about earlier, Drew Holiday has missed some games this
He was
year.
sick. He missed he seems to sit out back-to-back games all the time. They're resting him. I think partially they don't care where they are in the East.
Yeah.
I think that they know that they can win one of the first 2 games on the road in like the Eastern Conference Finals, steal home court. I don't think they care where they play as much. They just want to be a healthy unit going into the playoffs. But past their top few players, I mean, Bobby Portis has continued to have a great season. They just don't have the depth. They don't have the depth at the guard spot that some of these other teams have. Having said all that, like, who do you, and this isn't something that we necessarily said we were going to talk about, but who do you have coming out of the East? If you had to pick a team right now.
That's a good question. I think the deepest team for me is the Celtics. So like I would have to go with the Celtics because I know that you're going to have one or two guys that are going to go down for injury, and they're the team that is probably going to be the least affected by that.
Yeah.
Like even if Tatum goes down for 3 weeks, like any team that can lose an MVP caliber player and still be okay. Like I imagine the other, like I could see Brogdon stepping up. I could see other guards in that rotation stepping up, and then Jaylen Brown taking on a heavier scoring load,
Yeah.
and then they could still beat a lot of teams.
And they're so balanced. Like
Exactly.
they were without Robert Williams for the first like 30 games of the year.
Exactly.
He's come back. I think he started his first game last night. You've got Al Horford. They're just so balanced positionally, defensively. Grant Williams is another guy who, took a big step in the playoffs last year. So the Celtics are very balanced. And you saw people, or at least what you thought you saw, was like the passing of the torch last year when the Celtics swept the Nets. I see that series going a lot differently this year if they play. I don't think it would nearly be as one-sided. And I almost, if I had to bet my life on a team, I think it's crazy for me to put my life in Ben Simmons and Kyrie Irving's hands, but they've done it before.
Yeah.
They've got 2 of the best players in basketball that have won championships. And I'm sorry, but with the season KD's having, he's having a better year in my mind than Tatum. So I would almost be inclined to pick the Nets over the Celtics, the team that still, until they're dethroned, and regardless of what kind of season they're having, I'm banking on them figuring it out, is Milwaukee. There's not one guy in the East that can guard Giannis.
Yeah.
The Celtics can throw the most bodies at him and make it the most physically challenging for him. But until the Bucks are dethroned healthily in the playoffs, I would still almost have them as the favorites to come out. And I want to be wrong. It's weird that I'm finding myself rooting for the Nets right now. It's very weird.
Yeah.
Because I've always been a Kyrie hater. Ben Simmons was, that as soon as the Sixers traded him, the people were like, what the hell are the Nets doing? He didn't even play last year, his mental aspect, but he seems mentally clear. And then kind of some of those guys that we talked about earlier, Nicholas Claxton, Royce O'Neal, some guys that are just stepping up for them. And I think Watanabe shoot one of the best 3-point shooters in the NBA this year. He got a really nice stroke.
Absolutely. Helping stretch the floor a lot for them.
So you'd have the Celtics beating Milwaukee if they met in the playoffs.
Well, I'm thinking about it from a more practical standpoint. Just the fact that they're deep. Like I think that all the other teams that we talked about, like the Bucks and the Nets, like the Nets, like for right now, I think this is going to be a good indicator of what's going to happen. Like if a guy like KD goes down, what does that team look like? And I just think that the Celtics, they're a team that Jason Tatum gets in foul trouble, that's okay. They have a rotation that can deal with that.
Yeah.
If KD gets in foul trouble, gets hurt, has an off game, like I don't see Brooklyn rallying to win when KD isn't being KD.
You'd have to be super, super reliant upon Kyrie. And we're about to see it. I imagine the Nets are going to struggle in his absence. I don't know how they couldn't.
I think they're about to take a nosedive. I mean, I think, we're going to see, I think they went like 12, they're like 12 or 13-1 recently.
They won, I think, 10 or 11 in a row.
Yeah. They won, I think, like 12 in a row. And then they lost one. So like they're looking really, really great. But so much of that was because KD was looking like an MVP candidate.
Yeah.
Like it's I know Kyrie was number one in the East guards fan voting, but he wasn't the number one guard in the East. Let's be real.
Not the number one player on his team.
No. But yeah, I think the Nets certainly could make a lot of noise in the East. At the beginning of the season, I think everyone was like, "Oh, it's going to be the Bucks and the Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals." I was saying that too. I'm opening it up to Brooklyn could be in there, and so could Cleveland.
You like Cleveland that much, huh?
Cleveland could sneak in there. I think they are more health dependent than a lot of these other teams. But dude, when you have a guy that can score ungodly amount of points like Donovan Mitchell,
70, what was it, 71?
Yeah, 71. It was the second most points accounted for in NBA history.
I saw that.
Yeah.
Was it behind Wilt's game, right?
Yeah. Wilt was accounted. He accounted for like 102.
How many? So he only had one assist in his 100-point game.
Yeah.
Shame on him.
Yeah. But and Donovan Mitchell accounted for 100.
And they have a super, super balanced starting lineup, right?
They do.
They have one of the best defensive front courts in basketball. They've got a true point guard in Darius Garland, who should be getting more all-star votes than he's getting. And then they went out and they got their true alpha in Donovan Mitchell. And I'm happy for him. You could almost see now why he was more frustrated in Utah, like with the struggles Minnesota's having with Gobert. He feels liberated. I'm against some of the things he said about like his time playing in Utah racially and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not my point to speak on it, but I thought some of that was like a cop out a little bit, but I'm happy for him that he's having the success. He's taking that next step forward, and they're a very dangerous team. I don't think anyone wants to see them in the playoffs.
No.
But until they physically go and they beat the Nets like Boston did last year, I mean, they're going to have a very, very tough second round matchup.
Yeah.
I mean, they could still theoretically finish first. They're a team that probably needs home court. I think with the lack of playoff experience they have, they would really feed off of playing at home. And so they're going to play more for the regular season than I think some of these other teams will. You look at the Nets, you look at the Celtics, you look at Milwaukee. I don't think because of their veterans, they care as much where they're playing. I think they're comfortable. Like, I don't know that I could pick Cleveland as a favorite to beat any of those three teams in a playoff matchup.
No.
They can, though.
I mean, I think, yeah, talent on paper, they certainly can, but you brought up a good point. It's just lack of playoff experience. I think, I'm not somebody who looks at like Jason Tatum last year and is going to shit all over him because he lost his first trip to the finals.
Right.
He hadn't been there before. That stage he had never seen before. So it's like you can't fault players that just haven't experienced it. So like, yeah, you're absolutely right. Talent on paper, I think that they match up with anyone in the East, but they haven't been there. So
Jamodi.
Yeah,
a matter of doing it.
Yeah, they could Jamodi that, but they could also be deer in the headlights and just be like, whoa, this playoff atmosphere, this energy is a next level, and maybe we're a year or two away from dealing with that.
I mean, I think if hypothetically they get home court, I would pick all three of the teams that I'd mentioned above them, at least stealing one in Cleveland. Yeah. I don't think they're taking a 2-0 lead over any of those top three teams. KD and Kyrie are going to go get a game. And I'd be interested to see how they rebound if they lost that first game against any of those teams. But if assuming they finish top four, they're gonna win their first round matchup. That 4-5 seed in the East could be a really, really interesting first round playoff series. I think you've got to the point where the East is almost more top heavy than the West now, right?
Yeah.
Like the East is, for the first time in a long time, the more competitive conference can like easily,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. The top of the East is the top of the NBA, period.
And then you throw Denver in there, and they're really Denver's one of the top four teams in the NBA. The other three teams are from the East for me.
Yeah.
And then like who's next? Like
Memphis is close.
Memphis is nice, but
Well, hey, I'm huge. Jaren Jackson Jr. coming back and playing. I mean, I know he doesn't have a full season under his belt, but he's playing damn near Defensive Player of the Year since he's been back. He's putting up like almost 3.5
I think
blocks
he
a
was
game.
your preseason pick for defensive player. Of the
He
year,
was.
wasn't
I mean, but he started out the season, being injured.
Right.
That's tough. But yeah, he's looking great. He's looking fantastic, and I think he's one of those guys that is going to propel them to maybe being Western Conference Finals, maybe representing the West in the finals.
I mean, there are several teams in the West and the East that I think are a move away from cementing themselves as a legitimate threat. And it kind of segues into the next topic that I want to talk about with you. Teams that you think are a move away that need to make another move at the deadline, or teams that have kind of been failed experiments that should be better than they are that are not, that need to blow it up.
Yeah.
And you want to start in the West or the East for that?
We can start anywhere. Like, I think a lot of the teams that I'm going to talk about are East teams, but there's definitely teams in the West that need to blow it up as well. One team that we were talking about earlier, the Raptors.
Shocking to me a little bit.
Shocking. I mean, okay, like I want to start off by saying, like, I don't think Scotty Barnes has like regressed, and that's the reason for this blow up. Like, I want a more impressive start to his sophomore campaign? Yes, but I'm not looking at that as the sole reason. I'm looking at it as, Siakam's about to be out of the door after next season. I don't think he's going to re-sign. Like Van Vliet, I think, is an unrestricted free agent at the end of this
He's
season.
taking a step back this year. He's been less efficient. He's been less healthy, which could be contributing to it.
Right.
That's one of those teams I'm most disappointed in this year is the Raptors.
They've been underperforming, and I do think they need to blow it up. Like Siakam, like he's a guy that can help raise the ceiling. He's already proven that he can be the second best player on a championship kind of team. He can go somewhere else with a superstar and immediately take them to a contending status.
Sure.
I mean, absolutely. So I think the Raptors are that team, and if honestly all they need to do is keep OG Anunoby.
But I think that's one of the guys that's going to be most coveted at the deadline. And whenever they're looking to make a trade,
He might be.
they're not going to trade Barnes, right? Barnes is going to be their one untouchable guy, even probably over Siakam, just because of his age.
Well, Siakam they're paying Siakam so much money. They can't, you can't rebuild and keep Siakam.
But I think OG Anunoby is going to be the name that's going to be talked about most at the deadline because partially his contract, because he can go fit into so many teams and not take away what they have. Like if you look at like the Pelicans, for example, or Memphis, you could plug him in those lineups and he doesn't need the ball a lot. He can be a great defender who can guard 1 through 4. He can still just fit in with the flow of any team. But like, I think he's going to be a name that's certainly going to be discussed, but I don't know what his price tag would be. Like, I think that he'd require at least 2 first-round picks and a young talent.
Right.
Right? Like, would you trade, let's look at New Orleans, for example. Like, would you give up 2 firsts and Trey Murphy for him?
I don't know. I mean,
But that's like what I'm thinking. Like, if you took away Trey Murphy or you took away, why can't I say his name right
honestly, if I was Pelicans, I wouldn't make that trade because I already have a young defender I'm developing in Herb Jones. Like,
he's kind of taken a step back this year a little bit, partially because of Trey Murphy and just because they have so many bodies.
well, yeah, they have a lot of bodies, and I feel like he's just not tasked with doing a lot. Like, he just doesn't have that much responsibility. So, like, you only see his upside in little bursts.
I'm looking at the West as being so open right now that, like, outside of Denver being the favorites, New Orleans is right there, Memphis is right there. But what's different about them versus last? New Orleans obviously has Zion back. Zion's banged up right now, like he always is. But like I think that these teams need to capitalize right now.
Yeah.
There's a short window of having an opportunity to win a championship in the NBA. And that window is now in the West with Golden State struggling, with Denver being the best team in the West. Somebody needs to capitalize. Phoenix is down. I think that New Orleans or Memphis and need to be buyers at the deadline. I think the team that needs to make a move the most is the Warriors.
Right.
Granted, they haven't been healthy all year. Steph hasn't been there. So you really haven't seen them play collectively as a unit, but they're clearly lacking something defensively. And I think going after a player like Jakob Poeltl would be a really good move for them to make. He's available at the deadline, and there are only so many teams that are like tanking that even have assets that don't necessarily fit into their future. So I know that Pirtle's been linked to the Warriors. Apparently the Spurs are holding strong that they want 2 first-round picks, or at least one with like no protections at all.
Wait a minute. Are you saying that the Warriors need to upgrade from their all-star center and Kevon Looney?
If that's even possible.
Is that what you're telling
If
me
it's
right
even
now?
possible to upgrade from Kevon Looney. Yeah, right. Poor guy, because he's not like a bad player.
No.
Just the fact that he's even getting all-star votes is what is causing us to shit on him.
Yeah.
But I think that Denver's a more complete team. I think Memphis is a more complete team. And I think with how balanced New Orleans is, you look at the teams that have a short window, and that's got to be the Warriors, right? Like,
Yeah.
how many years do they have left of prime Steph? A few at most. Like, his game will age well. Like, do they still have Draymond in a year or two? He's talking about going to LA. He's going to chase money. He's clearly was a little bitter about the Poole situation. You really saw that whenever he punched him in the face,
Right.
aggressively.
Yeah.
So it's like, I think the Warriors are a team that need to be buyers at the deadline. I don't know who they go get outside of a guy like Poeltl. It seems like they're lacking the most defensively. I don't know if there are any other names that come to mind for you of who they should be possibly buying.
Well, we talked about the Raptors a little bit earlier. I think that they could see the impact of some perimeter defense like OG. I don't know if they have the resources to go after him.
I think the Warriors probably could make a play for OG, and he'd be a really good fit in their team.
Well, he would basically replace like what Gary Payton and Otto Porter were doing during the period in time when your team was very successful. So he would be the replacement for all of that production, and he could do that easily.
They'd have to give up quite a bit. And
Yeah.
I don't know what, like, do they have the picks? Would they trade picks for OG? I feel like the Raptors' asking price is going to be huge for him.
Yeah.
But he's going to be a player that's discussed at the deadline heavily. I just, with how open the West is, I feel like they need to make a move to capitalize in the window of the dynasty that they've had. And they're a team that can mortgage their future a little bit. They're still going to be competitive. I think a team that could go either way that's been a tough one to really put your finger on is the Lakers.
Yeah.
You know, like, I think if you asked this question 2 weeks ago, it would be no doubt about it. The Lakers need to be sellers at the deadline. They need to blow it up. They need to ask LeBron if he wants out. They need to look at trading Anthony Davis, but they're on a 5-game win streak without AD.
Yeah. Thomas Bryant's been stepping it up.
He's
hardcore.
been playing well. Dennis Schroeder's been playing pretty well.
Yep.
And I think that LeBron seems, for whatever reason, committed to living in LA. I think he wants to be in the city. He just signed with LA.
Yeah.
I think that they need to go all hands on deck. With how open the West is, a player that I could see them going for, and I don't know if they'd have enough to get him, would be Brad Beal.
Yeah.
I think the Wizards are probably already looking at him as, like, they just paid him $200 million for 4 years. And that's already failed. Like, the Wizards are going nowhere fast. They're going to be sellers at the deadline. Like, could Westbrook and 2 first-round picks, and they really don't have anything besides those first two-round picks. Like,
Yeah.
Reeves, I mean, he's an all-star voter. like
He's an
Reeves,
all-star caliber player.
like Reeves and 2 first-round picks and Russell Westbrook. Like, that could help the Wizards be shittier. Like, they're going to get even worse after that deal. Like, they need to be making a move to get worse. And I don't
Yeah.
see how the Lakers don't make some type of push. Like, I think LeBron was even quoted the other day saying, like, I know what I want to do. Like, he's ready to make a push.
Yeah.
And with their 5-game win streak, I almost think that they need to. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think they want to capitalize on the last bit of production that LeBron James can offer them because, a lot of people point at the Lakers and they say, "Oh, they're an unsuccessful team," but 2020 proved otherwise. This core that they put together won a championship, and I still feel like you're right. There's things that they can do to make them more successful right now, and to also further your point, it's like what teams out of the teams that are tanking can give up an asset that could help a team go from good to great. And I think one of the guys is Bogdanovich.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Pistons do not need to hang on to him. He's putting up 19 a game. He's doing it very efficiently. He's a guy that can create his own shot. He can play off the ball. He's got a lot of good offensive skills, and he's going to help space the floor. And that's what the Lakers need.
The Lakers could go after him. I also see a team like the Mavericks targeting someone like Bogdanovich. Luka needs more help,
Yeah.
right? Like the only players he really has to work with on his team are Christian Wood, who's pretty bad defensively. Like he's done well since who was it? Was it Dwight Powell that got hurt? Which one of their bigs for the Mavericks just went down? I can't remember. Some one of their bigs just got hurt. Christian Woods have been having to play more minutes, but really their second best player is Spencer Dinwiddie.
Yeah.
And I get fearful that Luka is going to get, he's kind of going to get like the LeBron treatment in Cleveland. Like I feel like the organization's just trying to build around him and they're not giving him enough help. I fear that if they don't get him more help, that he could end up wanting out in a couple of years. And that's the last thing that organization needs. He's one of the top 2 or 3 players in the NBA. They have to do whatever they can to help him win.
Yeah.
And they're currently not doing it. They should have brought back Jalen Brunson. Jalen Brunson only got paid like $25 million. Like they had the money to pay him and they chose not to. I think that the Mavericks need another player. And I think Bogdanovich could be a huge fit. I don't know what other, like I think Kyle Kuzma is a guy that's going to be targeted at the deadline. Like,
Yeah.
we talked about the Raptors. Pascal Siakam could get traded. I feel like there's a lot of guys like that could help these teams get even better. They need to make a move.
Absolutely. And just like, teams are making moves to get better, but teams are also just making moves just to blow things up. And one of the teams that just obviously needs to blow things up to me is the Chicago Bulls.
Yeah.
Like it's a team that is just, DeRozan is not a part of their long-term plans. Like you were saying on a previous episode, he just plays an antiquated form of basketball. It's just we're not looking for mid-range scorers in today's league. And Vooch, like as much as I like his game and like I like, smooth big man like he is, but like he's just not producing like he was a couple of seasons ago. So I don't think that he can be a part of their long-term plans either.
Yeah, I think that I just wondered how bad they could get. Even if they trade DeRozan, if they trade Vooch, can they get into the bottom 4 to where like they actually have a chance at one of these coveted incoming rookies? I don't know if they can get that bad. It's going to be a lot to catch up to San Antonio, to Houston. Like Orlando's going to have a tough, Detroit. Orlando's going to have a tough enough time getting down there. They seem to be more competitive this year.
Right.
But it's like, I wonder partially if the Bulls management, like pride's a thing. Like, do they say, hey, Levine hasn't been healthy. Lonzo hasn't played all year. Do we hold on for one more year? Because they do have some decent young pieces.
Yeah.
But they're not going anywhere this year at all. They're not going anywhere. Yeah, I just don't know if they can get bad enough to where they can compete with these other god-awful teams to compete. Like, if you don't get those top 2 picks, what are you mortgaging your competitiveness for?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very important. That's a very important question. I think it's mainly to not spend money, to just sort of ensure that you're ready to make the move for the future.
Yeah,
and so you have the money to make it. And so, like, I think, for that reason alone, I think DeMar DeRozan could be on a different team in the next month.
Like, could he go to the lake? Like, Chicago could want to move on from DeRozan's contract, from Vooch's contract. Russell Westbrook could bring a lot of money back. He's an expiring contract. Would they trade both of those guys for make it maybe like the 2027, make it completely unprotected, get Russ back? I don't think they're going to trade 2 first-round picks for those guys, but like those are guys that the Lakers could target that could make them significantly better. And regardless of Russell Westbrook being on one of the worst contracts in basketball, it's expiring. And the fact that it's expiring does make it attractive to teams of like the Bulls that don't want to be paying DeMar DeRozan $27 million for 2 or 3 more years just to finish as a 7 seed
Nope.
and to be bounced in the first round, right? So it's tough. It's tough. We're about to see how it unfolds in the coming weeks as we get closer to the All-Star break. I'm excited to see what happens at the deadline. I really am.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's going to be a lot of teams that are looking to go from good to great, and teams that are looking pretty decent and want to get worse.
Yeah.
So it's going to be really interesting.
You're going to have a tough time catching up to some of those really bad teams.
Oh yeah. And when we say it like that, it's always go Spurs go, because even when we're trying to be bad, we're awful. We're winning even when we're losing.
Oh man. Hey, as long as teams like Oklahoma City can, without SGA, beat Boston on any given night, I still have hope that we'll finish bottom 3 and we'll be getting Wemby and we'll be getting your beard trimmed and cut off whenever we get him.
Absolutely. Yeah, that sounds good.
That sounds like a good episode too.
Absolutely. Well, we just want to thank y'all for tuning in to another episode of the Baseline Bums podcast. It is your boy Rob, aka B-Ball Archives, and I have been with my boy Adam.
Yeah, guys, we appreciate you coming out. Please give us a follow. Baseline Bums podcast on Instagram, TikTok. Rob's been uploading our podcast as well. So go ahead and give us a follow. Also follow Rob's page, B-Ball Archives, on TikTok. He puts out some fire content pretty much every day. So we appreciate you guys. And as always,
Go Spurs, go.